June 2024 marks the 50th anniversary of Seattle celebrating Pride, a rallying cry for gay rights and queer visibility. In celebration of Pride and all family building options, I am thrilled to have two colleagues and founders of the PNWF Center for LGBTQ plus Family Building, Doctors Darcy Broughton and Stephanie Rothenberg, on the show today to discuss family building for all in 2024. Welcome to the Baby or Bust Fertility Podcast, the podcast with interviews and in-depth discussions on all things reproductive health, created to support anyone curious about infertility, miscarriage, and early pregnancy. I'm your host, Dr. Lora, Shahine, a double board-certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist and former fertility and IVF patient myself, helping build families for almost 20 years, and dedicated to supporting and educating you on your family building journey. June 2024 marks the 50th anniversary of Seattle celebrating Pride. Seattle has an inclusive history for the LGBTQ plus community, and it dates back to the late 1800s with welcoming establishments in the Pioneer Square neighborhood. The 1960s and 70s saw more organization in the forming of the Seattle chapter of the Gay Liberation Front and the opening of the first gay community center in 1971. The first Gay Pride Week was held in Seattle in 1974, and it consisted of about 200 participants picnicking and dancing to increase visibility for gay rights. Pride Week has grown over the last 50 years to a citywide celebration with an estimated 300,000 people gathering, participating in the parade, and celebrating the gay community. My practice, Pacific Northwest Fertility, has served the queer community of Seattle and surrounding areas with our own sense of pride in helping all types of family building. The fertility field as a whole does not have a history of being so open and so inclusive in all types of family building. But in 2020, with the inspiration and hard work of my two colleagues and partners that I'm interviewing today, PNWF officially opened its Center for LGBTQ plus Family Building. Here to talk about the importance of creating this center and its mission are Doctors Darcy Broughton and Stephanie Rothenberg. Welcome to the show, Darcy and Stephanie. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us.
We're so excited to be here, Laura.
Well, I am thrilled to have you here. And I just would hope that you could take a second to tell the listeners a little bit about you, kind of your training and your interest in creating the Center of LGBTQ plus Family Building at PNWF. Darcy, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. Well, I'm from the Seattle area. I'm from Bremerton, Washington, just right across the water. But I did all my medical training elsewhere, as we doctors often do. And so I went to the East Coast for college and medical school, and I trained at Brown for med school, and then was lucky to come home to Portland, Oregon, or home-ish, I guess, to Portland, Oregon, and did my residency at OHSU. And then I went to the Midwest to train for fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and infertility to St. Louis, Missouri, which was a wonderful place to train. But I was always really motivated to come home to the Seattle area. So I was thrilled to be able to come home and work with you, Laura, and this great group of doctors at Pacific Northwest Fertility. And my interest in taking care of this community goes back a long ways. I identify as a member of the queer community, and I went to a women's college in Western Massachusetts, and some of my very best friends are lesbians that have grown their families over the past 20 years, and I've seen them go through that, and really special for me to be able to help build queer families in my job every day. Yeah, that was part of the motivation and interest in opening the center.
Oh, well, we are so lucky to have you at PNWF and all that you do. How about you, Stephanie? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I went to medical school at the University of Washington, and that's where I met my spouse, who's an orthopedic surgeon, and we couples match, and where we you hitch your wagons together and put your applications together and match at one place. And we went to University of Pittsburgh, where I did my OBGYN residency and my fellowship in REI. And then I've been at PNWF since then. It's the best job in the world. And I'm so proud of the the practice that we have here in Seattle. My journey to like being really passionate about LGBTQ family building, it started, I was a big weirdo in medical school that I wanted to be an REI from my first year of medical school. And I was really, the way that I got passionate about that was thinking about fertility preservation, which in like the aughts was really about people with cancer. And then my interest in that really expanded more in my residency and fellowship of like, wait a minute, like there's so many parts of this that's really important for fertility preservation, specifically for people who are trans and non-binary. And so that was kind of my focus in fellowship and research in that field. And so that was part of kind of my passion of, taking care of people who are trans and non-binary. And here we are. I also identify as queer, which I'm in like what very much looks like a cis hetero relationship. I'm married to a man, and so that's one of those things that not a lot of people kind of know about me, but it's interesting. Professionally, it's something I'm very open about because I talk to a lot of people about it. So
well, you guys both kind of came together and really brought the idea of opening up the Center of LGBTQ Family Building at PNWF. And I would say the senior partners at that time, which, yes, I am old, were sort of like, well, we already are open and we have this incredible history of being very caring and, open and welcoming to the queer community for family building. And I want to reflect on the fact that that is not the case for the history of the fertility community. And there's actually a really non-inclusive history and certain clinics, even in the Seattle area, that would only do fertility treatment for married couples. And that was sort of code for, if you aren't married or even single, or if you were lesbian couple or a gay male couple, you can't come here for your family building because we only treat married couples. It was sort of a interesting way to kind of get around it. And, one of our founding partners of PNWF, Lori Marshall, has been practicing for, what is it, like 50 years, you guys? It feels like it. No, it's like, 40 years. But she was the first practitioner in the Seattle area to be very open and would treat single moms, lesbian couples, and just very proud of it. And it's a part of opening up this practice, PNWF. And so when you guys brought it to us, we were like, well, we already do that. And you really helped us understand that, there's such an important piece of really elevating it, creating a center. It's more than just putting a website up that says we treat, queer families. And I'd like for you guys to kind of expand a little bit on your vision, and especially Stephanie, just kind of your research and doing all of the fertility preservation for trans, and kind of what was your vision for starting the center and why is it important to have it?
Yeah, I think that the fertility community has been kind of ahead of the game, even though it hasn't been perfect, but ahead of the game of, supporting, same-sex female couples and same-sex male couples and growing their families. And I do think that one of the primary things that we really wanted to focus on was to make it really inclusive for the trans and non-binary community, because we live in a very binary world, and the world is not binary, and even increasingly so with different generations, right? The millennials, the what do they call all of the gang now?
Generation Z?
Yeah, like Gen Z and then
Gen Z?
Gen Y or Gen Alpha, right?
Oh man, that's the youngins. Yep.
No, right?
So even though we had this open practice and welcoming clinic, I certainly did not receive any training specifically to how to care for queer families. I certainly learned nothing about fertility preservation for trans patients. And I think your experience, both of you actually honestly training later than I did, allowed you to have a different vision. Stephanie, for you particularly, tell us about your research and what you did specifically for fertility preservation.
Yeah, so Darcy and I were pretty lucky that in our fellowship is really when this world started to like open up and we both had interest in it. I know for me, it just made a lot of sense of like, how do we take better care of these patients? And so we would see fertility preservation patients, mostly adolescents who were getting ready to start gender affirming therapy, and we didn't have answers for them. So the question of this research was like, how do we counsel these patients? How do we take really good care of people who are sitting in our office right now and need this like life-saving treatment and need to start it soon? So my research was focusing on let's create an animal model. And so we started with mice and gave them testosterone and looked at their ovaries and did IVF and looked at the outcomes for that. And then, in conjunction of really taking care of human patients who are here in front of us with the limited knowledge that we had, including some really brave patients who tried IVF when we didn't even know if it was going to work. And so that was lucky to publish in the New England Journal of Medicine for a very brave 16-year-old who did the process of IVF and had never gone through estrogen based puberty before, but we were able to freeze 4 eggs for him. And that was like the world. He really wanted to have the option of doing that. And so it was a really nice mixture of interesting science, but also just like taking really good care of patients.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. And I remember when the two of you guys came to the senior partners, the old guard, and said, we really want to open up a center for family building for the queer community. You know, we sort of felt like, well, we already are open, but you guys, you really just brought so many ideas to us. Darcy, what was your vision for the center? Like, what would make it different from just putting a website up that says we take care of LGBTQ family building? What was different about having a center dedicated to it at PNWF?
I think a lot of it is about expertise, Lora, and I think it's highlighting the fact that we have, come from a background of doing research in this area and really have invested in learning a lot about how to take great care of queer families. And that involves kind of training for us as physicians, but also really training everyone that works in the clinic to take great care of these patients, right? And for me, a big part of the center was really the recognition of the fact that queer families coming in to see us for family building may have different needs than our other patients in the clinic that are coming to see us for infertility. That might be cis patients that are in heterosexual relationships. Our queer families come to us because they're lacking some of the ingredients that they need to build their families. And that's a different experience than a patient with infertility. And so really highlighting that and knowing that there is something inherently frustrating about not necessarily having all the ingredients that you need to have a baby, and trying to meet those patients where they are and recognize that experience is unique.
Yeah. I also appreciate, Stephanie, you really helped with this, even just making new consent forms, because traditional IVF or IUI consent forms are male, female partner. I think some of our old consent forms had the word husband on it. Like, you just like, you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry.
They did. Yeah. It was, you want to look at the experience from like that very first phone call to what is your office environment like? Do patients feel safe? Because unfortunately, a lot of people in the queer community have encountered a lot of difficulties in the medical environment and are hesitant to come in. So not only are they frustrated that they have to come in and source some ingredients at all, but a lot of them have had really poor experiences in the past. And so there's a lot of things that we do to make sure that their experience is as good as it can possibly be. And I mean, I tell patients we're not perfect, but I can tell you that we really care. And, why do we need to say like her ovaries? We could just say ovaries. Why do we have to say like his sperm? Just say sperm. Like you can go through and change that language so that it's, just talking about science instead of, having it be really gendered. So we use the same consent forms for everybody, for all comers, right? And that was really important. And just being conscious about language that we use, being sensitive about what's your name?
Mm-hmm.
What are your pronouns?
Right.
And even just simple things like your preferred name. It's like, no, it's actually just your name, right? Like it's these
Right.
little things that if you're not thinking about them can be just like tiny little microaggressions. And we just want everybody to come in and be comfortable in the environment. So yeah, we've spent a lot of time just going through that experience step by step by step.
Yeah. And it's not all at once. You guys instigated the sensitivity training. And so every single person at PNWF really learned just how important it is to think about pronouns, to ask. I learned what a dead name is, like I'd never even heard that term before. And so it's when someone transitions and they don't want to use their birth name, but we often will use driver's license or some sort of government issued ID as information to kind of get their names in the chart. And so then we need to be really sensitive about, well, that's actually not what you call them. They don't want to be called that. So I have learned so much from you guys, and I think the whole team has. And I think the word safe that you said, Stephanie, is really important. It's creating a place where, anybody who wants to build a family feels safe and respected and that they're going to be cared for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the case for every single person that comes in our door, right? And that's what I think both Darcy and I really try to do in our practice is just like normalizing, like, hey, you're here, you're a person. Like these are three ingredients that we need: egg, sperm, and a place to put them. Like we need to have those things. If we don't, where are we going to get them? And it's just like it actually doesn't matter to us, like who your partner is or how you identify. Like those things are important, but to us, it's like you're just normal patients sitting in front of us.
Right. Less judgment, just more caring.
Yeah.
I really think that this is the first fertility center for LGBTQ families. At our national meeting, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, ASRM, the fellow from Stanford got up and said, "We are opening the first LGBTQ plus center in the United States." And I was like, I did my fellowship at Stanford. I was like, ours has been open for about 5 years. If you want any pointers, go ahead and we'll help you with the consent forms, right? Like, we've done this. You guys, you had such a vision. It's
Which
beautiful.
we did. We sent them all over to them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not proprietary. It's like, hey, we want to help everybody. Let's do this together.
Yeah,
so I
we
love
want
it.
there to be many centers around the country. That would be a dream. Correct?
Exactly. I totally agree. We're going to get back to talking to Stephanie and Darcy in just a second, but I want to pause to remind you just how important it is to follow, rate, and review the show. It really helps people find it. Here's the review. It's an old one, but I think it's important. It says, "This is a very good podcast. However, the host should do a term correction. Please stop using the term to conceive naturally, in air quotes. The correct term is without intervention. To use the term natural just perpetuates the stigma around using assisted reproductive technology." Well, you know what, Jack? I read this review back in 2022. It was eye-opening, and I actually very much have tried since then to not use the term natural, but I talk about trying without assistance or trying without intervention. So doing reviews are often very exciting, especially if they're praising the podcast. But I also read every single one so I can learn from it. So thank you, Jack, for this review. Now, make sure to follow, rate, and review the show wherever you're listening right now. And let's get back to the show. So, you guys, it's the 50th anniversary of Pride celebration in Seattle this year. How incredible is that? And, we are always involved. So, Darcy, why don't you let the listeners know what that means? Like, what is Pride in Seattle and how does PNWF participate?
Yeah, well, Pride is such an amazing month for us just to sort of highlight the work that we do every day, honestly. It's like we, get to celebrate for a month, I think, what we do on a daily basis, which is really awesome. And really bring visibility to the center and to what we're doing and what we're focusing on here. And so we're really excited to be involved in Pride. We get involved with Pride Fest in Seattle, and we have a big presence on the Saturday Pride Fest at Capitol Hill, and we have just a really fun, awesome booth. A bunch of our team members come and support, and it's a great opportunity for us to meet people that are thinking about family building and for us to engage with them and talk about the services that we offer and to interact with them in a really fun environment so that it seems maybe less intimidating to come see us in the clinic after they've met us at Pride. I also think it's amazing because we get to see some former patients with their families that always come and stop by.
Mhm.
And for us, that just is the biggest reward in the world to see the babies and the kiddos that are here because of the work that we do. And so it's just really special for us to be involved in that. And I think we take the opportunity all month, Lora, to, try to highlight in, different platforms kind of what we're doing and the services we can provide, and kind of destigmatize really the process of building your family as a member of the queer community.
I love it. And when is Pride this year? How do we figure it out, and how do we go?
So Pride is actually the whole month. We're obviously celebrating Pride Month, but the big celebration happens that last weekend. And so Saturday, June 29th is when we'll be on Capitol Hill with our PNWF booth. And then obviously the fun stuff for folks on Sunday as well, because that's when the Pride Parade's happening and there's another big celebration down at Seattle Center. But we'll be there Saturday. Come visit us. We'd love to see everybody.
Awesome. One last question for the listeners who are queer and they're looking for a fertility center that is going to help them feel safe and welcome and respected. Of course, they can come to Pacific Northwest Fertility in Seattle, obviously. But if they happen to live elsewhere and they don't feel like traveling to us, what are some things that they could look for in a clinic when they're trying to find that really special place? Darcy, do you have a couple of tips?
I think asking other members of the community for their recommendation is a great place to start. Most people will have contacts that potentially have gone through this process before. And I think, if you have folks you really trust that had a good experience at a clinic, most likely it's going to be a welcoming place for you to go and get care as well. And so I think that's such a great place to start. And I would say anecdotally, we have found that that's where so many of our patients come from. And the community is, oh gosh, our friend sent us, they had a great experience. And so I think that's always a great tip. And then I do think kind of looking at what's available online in terms of, taking a peek at their website, really looking at the language that the clinic is using, recognizing when you call to make your appointment, kind of whether they're asking about pronouns, whether the forms are inclusive, right? Sort of getting a sense of that when you are first interacting with a clinic can be really important as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I will say, I think personal recommendations are amazing. And that also there can be some amazing doctors or amazing clinics that might have crappy forms, because we had that until you guys came. So don't, definitely ask a little bit more. But I think that is really important. If they take the time to make the language inclusive, at least on their website and on those initial forms, that's a huge green flag. Stephanie, do you have any other tips you can think of for people looking?
I agree with everything that Darcy said. I also think that from an initial interaction with the clinic, whether it be the front desk staff or with your first appointment with a clinician, I think that you can take the temperature a little bit of, do you do the things that I'm looking for? There are some places that don't do a lot of donated egg or, directed donor sperm or known donor sperm. How often do you do these things? You can ask those questions. Do you do this? How often? Are you comfortable with this? Are these services that you can provide? And I think that initial consult can say a lot of like, is this a place that's going to take good care of me? The other thing is that you should really be able to give feedback about your care, but it is never your responsibility to teach people how to be queer competent. Okay. Like that is not your job. So they should be doing, the clinic that you're seeing should be doing their own work, and they shouldn't be asking you to teach them something. That's not your responsibility. So that would be one thing that I would, hold up if you're having to do constant education. But that being said, there's always going to be feedback. And that's something that I say to every single patient that I see of like, please let us know if something happens that is not the experience that you want to have, because we're constantly trying to make this better. So I think that there's a fine line between like giving feedback about something that doesn't go perfectly and teaching people how to take care of you as a queer person.
Yeah, that's great. I do think that that's important in a lot of medical care, being feedback being receptive. So like, we've sometimes have team members that say things that they didn't mean, like using a dead name because it was on the license or something like that. And if a patient comes to us and says, hey, can we just have like an alert in my chart where we only use the name that I want to be used? And if we are receptive, and take that feedback and really try to make the whole experience better, I think that is a good sign for the clinic, and that not every person is going to be perfect every single day, but we are really trying. And that is our goal, is to be safe and inclusive and a helpful place.
Absolutely.
Well, I have absolutely loved this experience. Having you guys on the show, my heart is just overflowing. I never get an opportunity to tell you how much I love you, even though I should say it every single day, and just how much I've learned from you guys. I think of myself as a very empathetic and, curious and sensitive person. But, oh man, I had so much to learn, and I've been very open, and you've really taught me so much about being that safe and inclusive fertility provider for the queer community. And I just can't thank you guys enough. We really appreciate it, Darcy and Stephanie. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having us. It's been so wonderful to chat.
Well, and I also wanted to tell you how proud we are of you. I mean, this is like such an amazing thing that you do, and all of our patients benefit from all of the education that you do, and the whole community really benefits. So you're crushing it. I love you so much. We're so proud of you.
We're so honored to be on Dr. Shahine's podcast. It's such a special thing for us. So thanks for the invite.
You're so famous.
You're the best. All right, you guys. Now I'm blushing. All right. So we will link in the show notes how to find the PNWF Center for LGBTQ plus Family Building. We'll also link to Dr. Broughton and Dr. Rothenberg's websites and maybe their Instagram accounts if they let me. Anything else you guys want to let us know before we sign off?
Happy Pride, y'all.
Yeah, happy Pride.
Happy Pride. I hope you enjoyed this incredible interview. I know that I loved having my colleagues, the doctors that I work with side by side every single day, and I can definitely call them friends, on the show to talk about this incredible center that they have co-founded and really started in order to support family building for the LGBTQ community in Seattle and really beyond. We now have patients coming from all over the country and internationally because they know that we have a welcoming center and that people who want to build all types of families are going to be welcomed and feel extremely cared for. Find this show and all others on my website, drlorashahine.com. You can find the show on YouTube as well as other educational content. Look for me on Instagram, TikTok. I just love educating. Reach out with an email, hello@drlorashahine.com, with any questions that you have or topics you'd like us to cover. Thank you to our friends at Seattle Sperm Bank and Braze Run Production for sponsoring the show. Thank you to my producer, Shannon Perry, and her team at Audiotocracy. This is your host, Dr. Lora Shahine. See you next week, and until then, wishing you love, luck, and pineapples.